I've been asked the question, why am I against competition? I made many videos about my views about competition, and I guess I'm just gonna make another one to basically explain in less than 10 minutes my views on it. I, like everybody else in this world, have been competitive. It is almost impossible to live in Western society and not be competitive, because the competition mindset is of the ego. So the ego is competition. The difference between me and many other people out there is that I've learned to identify the ego and not be a slave to it. So basically, I've learned to go beyond competition. So there's a state of mind that goes beyond competition. And this I see as bliss, art, peace, harmony. There is no competition. There is no better or worse. There's a realization and acceptance that yin is just as good as the yang. The positive is just as good as the negative. The male and the female are equal. There is no need to compete. Competition breeds violence, anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, and all the negativity. The negative emotions come from competition. Now, competition comes in many forms. Now, I see it would be very difficult for people to just drop competition completely, because it is the way of life in the Western world. And not only in the Western world, but it's the Western society is having so much of an influence on Eastern society that it's nearly the entire world is competition. But I'm speaking of something that is closer to Eastern philosophy, which will expose you to a different perspective. And this is the different perspective that I'm trying to share. It is a perspective where there is no competition. There is just peace. Competition to the highest level is death, killing. That is why there is war, competing, surviving for money or for resources. That is why there is war. It is competition, one nation against another nation. But if there is enough resources for everybody, then why is there need to compete? Why don't everybody just share? That's the vision that I see, something that goes beyond competition. Now, on a smaller scale, you're talking about individuals. You're talking about one human being against another human being. But I say, why do these individuals have to be against each other? Why not work together, in which to learn from one another and help each other better each other, to become stronger, to unite as one? So what I say as an example is, say you got the United States. They got a military force. But imagine if the military force within the United States was fighting amongst each other and killing each other. That is competition. But in order to be strong, the military force, they must unite to become one in order to fight off another country that may be doing harm to them. But there is competition in different levels. And what I'm speaking about is something that goes beyond competition. Now, you talk about, like I said, it's very difficult for people to just drop out of competition. But if people cannot drop out of competition, what I recommend is healthy competition opposed to unhealthy competition. Now, what is the meaning of health? Well, that is something that you're going to have to discover for yourself through experience. But I know what health is for me. And there's a difference between a person who's competing with another individual and saying, hey, let's see how many push-ups, who could do the most push-ups. That's a way of competition. But I see that as a healthier form of competition. There's nobody getting hurt. But an unhealthy way of competition I see is something like competitive fighting, like cage fighting. Now these people are seeing who can knock who out, who can hurt who the most. That is basically violence. That is basically a step towards war. That is the lower degree of gang violence. That is the lower degree of actual war. You have two individuals fighting against each other to see who can beat one another. That is violence. I see that as unhealthy competition. And then there is healthier competition. They do it all the time in schools. Who has the best test score? A healthier way of competition. You see the Olympics and the gymnasts. Who can perfect these moves of gracefulness? That is a healthier way of competition. Who could ice skate and perform to perfection? That is a healthier way of competition. Now you have something very popular like football. That can be very unhealthy. I have heard these athletes die pretty young. There's a lot of brutality, a lot of broken bones, a lot of injuries, but it is safer because there are rules against hurting a person purposely, to basically injure them on purpose. And there are also much equipment, helmets and gears to protect the athletes. So it's a healthier form of competition than, say, cage fighting, where it's just straight violence. Now you got healthier forms of competition. Say in Olympic boxing, they put on headgear and gloves. The boxers put on headgear and gloves. That's a little healthier competition, but it's still unhealthy because even with headgear and gloves, there could be much damage done to the brain through these heavy hitting. Now there is healthier competition such as wrestling, which is just based on the pin and points. Even Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can be a healthier form of competition when it's just submission and there's no strikes that damage and fracture bones and make each other bleed. So there are different ways of competition. And what I recommend for people is, if they are to compete in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way. But what I'm speaking about is the highest level, and that is something that goes beyond competition. Then one is just expression. One just practices art because he enjoys art. He's not competing with the person next to him, but he simply practices it because he loves it. And through his love for his art, he naturally gets better. Other people around him may try to compete with him, but since he does not compete with others, and that's what makes the difference. Now, there will always be people that are more talented, more skillful. An artful person that is non-competitive will see talent and try to work with the individual to see if the person could help him reach a higher level. There is no need to compete. Now, an artful person that's non-competitive can be very skillful, more skillful than a lot of people around him. And if people wish to learn from him, he has nothing against teaching them to help them get to his level, or maybe even above his level. A non-competitive person is somebody who is willing to share. He's not somebody who is trying to make himself seem as if he's above others. Now this is the difference between a non-competitive person and a competitive person.